I draw your attention in passing to consonants which change in nature their combinations. In this case, F becomes V, D becomes T, and G becomes K, as in these examples that I will cite for you. Dad's all rigged, ends in chickens, Welsh rabbit, lots of nodding. Not at all.
I've got a toothache.
Let's continue!
Yes.
To resume, it takes years and years to learn to pronounce correctly. Thanks to science, we can achieve this in a few minutes. In order to project words, sounds, and all the rest, you must realize that it is necessary to pitilessly expel air from the lungs and let it pass delicately, caressingly over the vocal cords which like carve. So leaves in the wind will suddenly shake, agitate, vibrate, or uvulate, or fricate, or jostle against each other, placing everything in motion, the tongue, the palate, the teeth, and the lips. Finally, the words come out through the nose, the mouth, the ears, the pores, drawing along with them all the organs which we have named, torn up by the root in a powerful, majestic flight, which is none other than what is called, improperly, the voice. Whether it is modulated in singing or transformed into a terrible symphonic storm, with a whole procession of garlands, of all kinds of flowers, of sonorous artifices, labials, stencils, occlusives, palatals, and others. Some caressing, some bitter or violent.
Oh, I've got a toothache.
As for the Neo-Spanish languages, they are closely related. So closely, in fact, that they can be considered as true second cousins. Moreover, they have the same mother, Spanish with its mute E. That is why it is so difficult to distinguish them from one another. That is why it is so important to pronounce correctly and to avoid errors in pronunciation. Pronunciation itself is worth a whole language. A bad pronunciation can get you into trouble. In this connection, permit me parenthetically to share a personal experience with you. I was very young, little more than a boy. It was during my military service I had a friend in the regiment, a chief, who suffered from a very serious defect in his pronunciation. Instead of F, he said F. Therefore, instead of birds of a feather flock together, he said birds of a feather flock together. He said Philly instead of Philly. Fearman instead of Fearman, French bean instead of French bean. Go frig yourself instead of go frig yourself. Fargo instead of Fargo. Fee-fi-go bum instead of fee-fi-go bum. He said Philip instead of Philip. Victory instead of victory. February instead of February. March, April instead of March, April. Gerard de Nerval, and his nut is correct. Gerard de Nerval. He said Mirabeau instead of Mirabeau. And et cetera instead of et cetera. And thus instead of et cetera instead of et cetera. And thus and so forth. However, he managed to conceal his faults so effectively that thanks to the hats he wore, no one ever noticed.
Oh, yes, I'm going to...
We'll first consider the points of similarity in order the better to apprehend, later on, that which distinguishes all these languages from one another. The differences can scarcely be recognized by people who are unaware of them. Thus, all the words of all the languages
I've got a toothache.
are always the same! Just as all the suffixes, all the prefixes, all the terminations, all the roots.
Are the roots square?
Square, cube, that depends.
Oh, I've got a toothache.
Let's go on! Yes. Thus, to give you an example, which is little more than an illustration, take the word front.
How do you want me to take it?
However you wish, so long as you take it, but above all, do not interrupt! Let's go on, take the word front, how do you take it?
Yes, I've got it.
The word front is the root of the word frontispiece. It is also found in a fronted. Ispiece is a suffix, and after the prefix they are so called because they do not change. They don't want to!
Oh, I've got a toothache.
These prefixes are of Spanish origin. I hope you noticed that, did you?
Oh, my toothache.
Let's go on! You surely also noticed that they've not changed in French. And now, miss, nothing has succeeded in changing them in Latin either. Nor in Portuguese, nor in Romanian, nor in Sardinian, nor in South Italian, nor even in Oriental. Front, frontispiece, the fronted, always the same word, invariably with the same suffix, the same prefix, and the same root. And it is always the same for all languages.
In all languages, the word means the same thing?
sound structure, not only for this word, but for all conceivable words in all languages. For one single notion is expressed by one and the same word and its synonyms in all countries. Forget about your teeth!
I'm gonna do that! Yes, go on.
Good. How would you say, for example, in French, the roses of my grandmother are as yellow as my grandfather, who was Asiatic?
My teeth ache!
Go on and answer anyway!
In French?
In French?
Well, in French it should be, the roses of my grandmother are
As yellow as my grandfather, who was Asiatic.
well, then in French it should be the roses of my, how do you say grandmother in French?
In French, grandmother.
The roses of my grandmother are as yellow. Is it yellow in French?
Yes, of course.
The roses of my grandmother are as yellow as my grandfather who got it.
No, who was
Asiatic.
That's it!
Got it too.
Hey! So what? Let's continue. Translate the same sentence into Spanish and then into Neo-Spanish.
In Spanish, it would be the roses of my grandmother are as yellow as my grandfather who was Asiatic.
That's wrong.
In Neo-Spanish, the roses of my grandmother are as yellow as my grandfather who was Asiatic. Oh,
That's wrong. That's wrong! That's wrong! You have inverted it. You've confused Spanish with Neo-Spanish and Neo-Spanish with Spanish. It's the other way around.
my tooth hurts and you're getting mixed up.
You're the one who is mixing me up. Pay attention and take notes. I will say the sentence for you in Spanish, then in Neo-Spanish, and finally in Latin. Pay attention, for the resemblances are great. In fact, they are identical resemblances. Pay attention, listen carefully.
Oh, my teeth.
Hey! In Spanish, the roses of my grandmother are as yellow as my grandfather, who was Asiatic. In Latin, the roses of my grandmother are as yellow as my grandfather, who was Asiatic. Do you detect the differences? Translate this into Romanian.
How do you say roses in Romanian?
But roses, what else?
It's not roses. Oh, my tooth aches.
Certainly not. Certainly not, since roses is a translation in Oriental of the French word roses. In Sardanapalli, roses! Do you get it? In Spanish, roses!
Excuse me, Professor. Oh, how my tooth aches. I don't get the difference.
It's so simple. It's so simple. It's a matter of having a certain experience, a technical experience and practice in these diverse languages, which are so diverse, in spite of the fact that they present wholly identical characteristics. I'm going to try to give you a key.